Tennessee is headed to the college football playoff. Welcome to Off the Hook Sports, your last look with Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. I am Caleb Calhoun, filling in for Dave Hooker. I apologize, guys. We had some technical difficulties. There were some major software issues as we were trying to get them fixed, and they finally have gotten fixed. I want to apologize, SC Scout Guy. I know you have 3 streams open. It was an issue with our software. They were causing major issues. It was not our fault. We did what we could. Blame Restream. Yes, I'm calling Restream out the software we work with because this was absolutely ridiculous what happened. But we are live with you guys now to talk about the Vols beating the Vanderbilt Commodores 36-23. A few notes just Tennessee related on this. It is their 6th straight win over the Commodores, which is relevant because although they did beat the Commodores 22 straight years from 1983 to 2004, they hadn't won 6 straight since then. If I'm not mistaken, the closest they came... No, they did. Excuse me. They did. They won 6 straight from 2006 to 2011. However, the reason this is relevant is because they had lost 5 of 7 to Vanderbilt before then. There was a really bad period during the 2010s, decade of dysfunction, and that has been fixed. So Tennessee now is headed to the college football playoff in all likelihood as they clinch a 10-2 season, their second 10-2 season in 3 years. It is before 2022. They had not had 2 or fewer regular season losses since 2004. They had not had 10 or more wins since 2007. They've now done that twice in 10 years. They've won 6 straight against Vanderbilt. They are headed to the college football playoff. And also in all likelihood, with Ohio State beating Michigan, with Michigan beating Ohio State, they are likely to get a home game in the college football playoff. Very exciting stuff if you are a Tennessee fan. Again, last look brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Going to play a quick ad from them, and we're going to dive into the game after that.
To visit cctis.com. The information you need is easy to access, and setting an appointment is as simple as clicking the tab. Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, and Eye Care Optical at cctis.com. Simply the best.
All right, as many of you are noting, yes, for the second straight week, Tennessee had a very, very ugly first quarter. They probably had a lot of Vol fans scared. You thought, oh no, another SEC team that's going to fall on the road and blow their chances at a playoff. A few things were in play here that aren't typically in play, though, for those teams. One, Tennessee was not really on the road. Okay, if you saw Nashville, Vanderbilt Stadium was loaded with Vol fans. It was all over. Vanderbilt Stadium is Vol country when Tennessee plays Vanderbilt. So that was one big thing. The other big thing is that Tennessee not only started slow, but did things very uncharacteristic in the way they started slow. I mean, we're talking about the kickoff return for a touchdown, the Sampson fumble, but the Nico Iamaleava interception and the 4th down stop were not like them. And the reason those weren't like them is because Iamaleava's had his issues this year. He doesn't grossly underthrow touchdown passes like he did to Dante Thornton right there. On top of that, the 3rd and 4th down stops were on straight up running plays under center where Tennessee has been successful all year, and it was a bad Vanderbilt defense that stopped him. That was odd. But it doesn't matter because Tennessee pulled out the win. They won the game 36-23. They fell behind 14-0 in the first quarter. They fell behind 17-7 at the end of the first quarter and then reeled off 29 unanswered points. The defense itself during that time period outscored Vanderbilt 30 after falling behind 14-0. Tennessee outscored Vanderbilt 36-3. The defense was dominant except for a late drive that really didn't matter. But Tennessee is now headed to the college football playoff. And again, I want to stress this. A home game all of a sudden looks likely. As Michigan beat Ohio State earlier in the week, Ohio State's not going to the Big Ten title. Now, they do have quality wins over Penn State and Indiana to hang their hat on. And they have a quality loss to Oregon. They have a better loss than Tennessee. They actually have their two losses are overall in the conglomerate better than Tennessee's 2 losses. Their 2 best wins are better than Tennessee's 2 best wins. But when you break things all the way down, there's a very strong argument, guys, that Ohio State has a better resume. So I'm not so sure Tennessee's going to jump Ohio State just because Ohio State lost to Michigan. I don't know if that's going to happen, okay? Their schedule strength is harder overall. But Ohio State's 2 losses are better than Tennessee's 2 losses, and their 2 best wins are better than Tennessee's 2 best wins. Quality of loss and quality wins do matter. They have to count for something, at which point you can make the case for Ohio State over Tennessee. What's big about Tennessee, though, is that Vanderbilt's going to a bowl game. So let's talk about this for a minute. Tennessee has beaten, I believe, 5 teams now that are going to bowl games. They beat Oklahoma, who clinched a bowl game with the win over Alabama. They beat Florida, who clinched a 7-win season with the win over Ole Miss. They beat Vanderbilt, who clinched a bowl game. They have beaten Alabama themselves. So that's 4 right there. Well, they've played 6 teams going to bowl games. So they have 4 wins over bowl teams. They've played 6 overall because they also lost to Arkansas and lost to Georgia, both on the road. So their schedule strength doesn't look as bad as it could, to be honest with you. And taking that into account, I really wouldn't sit there and scoff at the possibility of Tennessee getting a home playoff game with this Ohio State loss. I just think that there's a lot more that has to go into play. I don't think it's a guarantee. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens. Also, as far as resumes, the NC State North Carolina game was going to be a factor in that as well. But most importantly, Tennessee is going to the big dance. They're going to the college football playoff. They will have a week game the first weekend of December. Whether or not that's a Friday or a Saturday, we don't know. But at the end of the day, Tennessee got a huge, tremendous, amazing win over Vanderbilt. How often do you say that? It was the biggest Tennessee-Vanderbilt game of the modern era, quite honestly, for the ball. So let's get into it. Takeaways, turning point, and report card, and torchbearers as we get set. We're going to start with the takeaways. What were the takeaways from Tennessee's 36-23 win at Vanderbilt? Well, it started with another horrible start. For the second straight week, Tennessee started the game off horribly. Remember, last week they were scoreless in the first quarter against UTEP before they ended up winning 56-0. We thought at that time that was because they were lollygagging around because they were so focused on the other noon games that affected their playoff outcome, most notably Indiana and Ole Miss. Both of those teams lost, by the way. In reality, maybe they just needed time to get rhythm. I mean, this team has looked bad to start games offensively in particular all year long. They went 3 straight games without scoring in the first half, won 2 of them. They went 4 straight games without scoring in the first quarter, won 3 of them. So truth be told, this team has struggled all year early. It just takes them a while to get going. But boy, when they did they? I mean, they were great. You got to really start to think, maybe it's just the freshman jitters with Nico Iamaleava. Maybe it's just some little mistakes here and there. I think a lot of this is Josh Heupel, the way he's built his team. They prep so hard that teams nowadays throw a little bit different wrinkles at Tennessee that they didn't expect to see because Josh Heupel has shown a propensity to not be able to adjust. And I think they're testing over whether or not he can adjust. And to this point, by the way, we have to be fair. Josh Heupel has adjusted many times relatively well. We can criticize the Georgia game. We can criticize Tim Banks not blitzing. We can criticize the Arkansas game and the offensive woes. But in general, given all these horrible starts, you have to say that Josh Heupel's better at pregame or in-game adjustments than we thought. Because, again, Tennessee, for those who don't remember, against Vanderbilt took the opening kickoff, ran it into the end zone for a touchdown to go up 7-0. Dylan Sampson fumbles on the Vols' opening offensive drive, which sets up another Vanderbilt touchdown to put them up 14-0. Not only that, Tennessee then scores a touchdown to make it 14-7, but Vanderbilt marches right down the field to make it a 17-7 game entering the second quarter. And you just felt that Tennessee the battered fall syndrome was kicking in, and not just battered fall syndrome, but battered SEC favorites on the road syndrome this year in college football was going to kick in. Both of those things together made everybody believe they were going to lose. So for Tennessee to recover is a big deal. How did they recover? Well, that's our second takeaway of the game. Big plays early dictated the outcome. We talked about the kickoff return for a touchdown. We've talked about the Dylan Sampson fumble. How about this? How about the fact that Tennessee was stopped on a 4th and short when they're never stopped on 4th and shorts when they get under center? They did that, which gave Vanderbilt a ton of momentum. And most notably, Nico Iamaleava underthrew Dante Thornton on what should have been a clear-cut touchdown pass, but he just underthrew it, so the pass was intercepted. Those were the big plays for Vanderbilt. However, Tennessee had some of their own big plays, particularly in the second quarter. Jermon McCoy had one of the most incredible interceptions you will ever see. It was right after Tennessee got stopped on their 4th down play. You had to really love that. Of course, Iamaleava followed that up with an interception of his own, but then Tennessee got a 4th down stop. And that was a big deal. Those two things, all of those things together were all the big plays, but that wasn't it. After Tennessee got a 4th down stop, they had the issues on kickoffs, but Max Gilbert nailed a 50-yarder that hit the top of the crossbar and bounced in to cut Tennessee's lead deficit to 1 score. And then to tie it up, what happened? They get a stop. They receive a punt. It was the first punt of the game for either team. And Tennessee, Nico Iamaleava completes an 86-yard touchdown pass to Dante Thornton. 86 yards. So with that, the big plays consistently were dictating the outcome of this game, and you have to give a lot of credit to everybody involved, and you really got to give a lot of credit to Tennessee for sticking through it and Josh Heupel for sticking through it, because again, the big plays that went against them, the kickoff return, the fumble by Dylan Sampson, the turnover on downs, and the interception by Nico Iamaleava, plus giving up a field goal drive. But they stuck with it, and once they got the big plays of their own, including the 50-yarder by Max Gilbert, the 86-yard touchdown pass to Dante Thornton, their own turnover on downs and interception before that, they really got it going. Speaking of that big touchdown pass to Dante Thornton, most notably, is that Tennessee's passing game seems to have returned. As we've talked about at length all year, Tennessee has had major disappointing issues in the passing game. It's not like the running game wasn't there, by the way. Dylan Sampson had 25 carries for 178 yards, a career high, by the way. And Deshaun Bishop added 13 carries for 61 yards. None of them had touchdowns, though. And the reason none of them had touchdowns was because Nico Iamaleava was the one to go off for Tennessee. Last week, he set a career high for 4 touchdown passes. This week, he matched that career high with four touchdown passes. Now, that interception was inexcusable. It's a bad underthrow, and I know many of you may have been ready to quit on him after that because that should have been a touchdown. However, he regrouped and threw 3 touchdown passes out after that. He threw 2 touchdown passes to Dante Thornton, including a 21-yard completion to Chris Brazel on a 3rd down to keep the first drive alive when Tennessee was trailing to 14-0 before the 28-yard touchdown pass to Dante Thornton. Then he threw the 86-yard touchdown pass to Dante Thornton. Then he threw a touchdown pass to Miles Kitzelman at the end of the first half to give Tennessee a 24-17 lead, capping off a 96-yard touchdown drive. And in the second half, he threw a touchdown pass to Mike Matthews, the freshman, a future elite duo, to make sure Tennessee went up 31-17. Speaking of big plays, by the way, the defense got a safety after that, and Tennessee then got a field goal to go up 36-17. We'll talk about that in a minute, but most notably, Iamaleava was the star in the passing game. He completed 18 of 26 passes for 257 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, and he also ran it 6 times for 42 yards. So he had a total of 299 yards, averaging 9.9 yards per an attempt, and throwing the 4 touchdowns. The passing game, guys, it's no longer a fluke. I know Vanderbilt's defense isn't great, but he did it in an SEC game. And just for the record, looking at his regular season numbers now, Nico Iamaleava finished the season, and this is kind of interesting, guys. I actually want to point this out to you. He finished the season with 15 touchdown passes, completed 181 of 277 for 2,255 yards. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. No, I'm sorry. Yeah. So Nico Iamaleava has finished the year with over 2,500 passing yards, completing over 65% of his passes, averaging over 8 yards an attempt, and he has 19 touchdowns to 5 interceptions on the year. And that's with all the issues in pass pro. So he finished strong because of these last 2 weeks, and he truly is on a roll. Last couple of takeaways real quick. We could talk about the injuries. Not only did Nico do this, but he did it amidst an array of injuries. As we talked about Dante Thornton and his 3 catches for 118 yards, who led the team in receiving. Well, he left the game with an injury. Rue McCoy got hurt in the pregame, so he was down 2 receivers by the end. Dylan Sampson had to leave due to an injury on a run at one point before returning. Peyton Lewis was out for the game due to an injury. He got hurt during the game. And Squirrel White was taken out late due to a cheap shot. So injuries really wrecked this team consistently, and they continue to persevere, and Nico Iamaleava deserves a lot of credit for it, as did the rest of the team. Finally, defense was completely dominant when needed. You can't blame the defense for falling behind 14-0, given the fact that it was due to a kickoff return and a fumble. I mean, after that, Tennessee went on a run, outscoring Vanderbilt 36-3. The defense forced a safety when it was 31-17. Tyree West got a tackle in the end zone, and they held Vandy to just 212 yards. And most of those yards, by the way, were on a meaningless touchdown drive when the Vols led 36-17, and it was the 4th quarter, and Tim Banks was just trying to make Vanderbilt work the clock and run it out, which they did. So Vanderbilt ended up scoring to cut it to 36-17, but it was a major dominant performance by the defense against an offense that has been very, very good throughout the year. So the defense gets a lot of credit, not for that drive and them trying to run clock at the very end. Basically what happened was if you really look at what really counts, they effectively held Vanderbilt 250 yards of total offense. That was pretty much it. So you got to give the defense a ton of credit. This was a great defensive performance overall. Again, now I'm going to point out Vanderbilt did move the ball in the first quarter, even though they only got 3 points against the defense on drives where the defense wasn't put in a bad spot. I mean, there was a fumble and there was the kickoff return. But I will say at the same time, the defense mostly did what it needed to do. So those are your 5 takeaways. Again, the last look brought to you Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Let's get to the turning point. The turning point from Tennessee's 36-23 win over Vanderbilt. There's a few you guys could point to, and I want you guys to bear with me because I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on the true turning point of this game because I think it's kind of an interesting one. So the real turning point happened. One of them you could point out to is after falling behind 14-0, Tennessee mounts a touchdown drive of their own. On that touchdown drive, Nico Iamaleava on a 3rd and 14 hits Chris Brazel for 21 yards for a first down. That was a big one. That's a good turning point. The other turning point could be the interception that Tennessee got. My turning point is the sack by Will Brooks. Now, hear me out. Vanderbilt, up until this point, Vanderbilt had gone up 17-7. They had then forced a turnover on downs against Tennessee. Tennessee thought they got the momentum back with an interception, but then Vanderbilt intercepted Nico Iamaleava on a bad underthrow by Iamaleava. And then they started moving the ball. Again, they got to midfield. On 3rd and 10 from the 46, Diego Pavia ran 8 yards to the Tennessee 46. It was 4th and 2. You were certain Vanderbilt was going to go for it, and you were certain they were going to get it, weren't you? Because they had been controlling the game to that point. And what happens? Diego Pavia gets sacked by Will Brooks and Bryson Eason. That changed everything for Tennessee. Now, they still needed a minute to get going because on the next drive, Max Gilbert hit a 50-yard field goal because they only got 21 yards on the drive. And then the defense had to force a punt. So there are a couple of more turning points you could point to. It's the Max Gilbert 50-yard field goal to cut the game to 17-10. But there's also Diego Pavia's incomplete pass on 3rd and 1. Honestly, I felt Vanderbilt should have punted it all on 4th and 1, or should have gone for it, but they didn't. So you could say forcing an incomplete pass on a 3rd and 1 by Vanderbilt at the 34. And then finally, the 86-yard touchdown pass from Iamaleava to Dante Thornton. I think when that happened, it was pretty clear at that point that there was no way Vanderbilt was going to come back and win this game, even though it was a tie. It was just a tie at that point. Tennessee had all the momentum and knew they were going to dominate. And then the 10-play, 96-yard drive at the end of the half to score a touchdown put them in control. Once again, the last look brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. When we get back, we're going to close this out with the torchbearers and our report card. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn.
To visit cctis.com. The information you need is easy to access, and setting an appointment is as simple as clicking the tab. Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, and Eye Care Optical at cctis.com. Simply the best.
All right, now let's get to our torchbearers in the game. And torchbearers from the Tennessee Volunteers 36-23 win over Vanderbilt. And there's a lot of different directions we could go for a lot of different players. And so I wasn't exactly sure where to go on defense. You got to give a shout out to Joshua Josephs, who had a tackle for a loss and a pass deflection. Omar Norman Lott, Bryson Easton both assisted on tackles for a loss. Jackson Moore had a key tackle for a loss. Tyree West had a safety. Jalen McMurray had a pass breakup. But my first, and Arian Carter led the team in tackles, 7 total, 3 solo, 1 pass deflection, and assisted on a tackle for a loss. But my actual first torchbearer in this game is, believe it or not, Will Brooks. And the reason Will Brooks is because Diego Pavia, except for that one touchdown drive in the fourth quarter, was totally and utterly useless in this game. Brooks also had a key 4th down stop. I talked to you guys earlier about the turning point of the game. That 4th down stop was the turning point of the game. So because of that, Will Brooks has to be a torchbearer. I can't ignore what he was able to do right there. He gets a helmet sticker. Congratulations to Will Brooks. He's been one of the best stories and best players for Tennessee all year long. He finished the game with 4 total tackles, 1 solo, but he assisted on a tackle for a loss. And if you look at Diego Pavia's stat line, again, was 5 of 19 until that touchdown drive for 35 yards. He finished 8 of 17 for 104 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. But 5 of 19. One of the only reasons he looked even semi-decent from there and not even worse was because Tennessee took their foot off the gas. But the biggest reason he struggled was because of players like Will Brooks, who did an incredible job. You just got to give credit to the secondary as a whole. They played an amazing game. And you're going to notice that as I go on. But Will Brooks definitely is a torchbearer from this game. Our next torchbearer, Dylan Sampson. Now, Dylan Sampson did fumble again early. He also didn't have a touchdown in this game, but he had a career high in running the ball. He had 25 carries for 178 yards, averaging over 7 yards a carry. Most notably, he got hurt twice in this game. He got hurt at one moment and had to be pulled and came back in. Deshaun Bishop was in for him and actually got a penalty, which almost hurt Tennessee. And then he got hurt late in the game. We think he's okay, but Dylan Sampson twice got hurt. And the reason he's a torchbearer is when Vanderbilt cut it to 36-23, Tennessee got the ball with just under 6 minutes to go. They had to hold on to the ball and hold on to the lead because Vanderbilt could have made it a 1-score game earlier. And all Tennessee did was give Vanderbilt a healthy dose of Dylan Sampson. Starting at their own 20 with 5:51 left, Dylan Sampson ran for 2 yards, then he ran for 3 yards, and then on 3rd and 7, he ran for 20 yards. Then after Iamaleava 10-yard run, Sampson ran for 15 yards. Those plays are what gave Tennessee the chance to run off the clock. Dylan Sampson, again, he should have been a Doak Walker finalist. It's a travesty that he wasn't, but he absolutely gets a torchbearer. Dylan Sampson gets a helmet sticker. Honestly, and this is a helmet sticker throughout the whole year to close out the regular season. Dylan Sampson's play was a big part of why Tennessee is going to the college football playoff, because he was just incredible throughout the season, ran hard. Yes, there were the fumbles. Yes, those need to be worked on. But as a player and as a whole, you can't help but fall in love with Dylan Sampson and how hard he runs. And once again, he's a torchbearer. This could be a seasonal achievement award, but he got a career high in rushing totals. So while Iamaleava had his best game in certain aspects, Sampson may have had his best game too, even though he didn't score a touchdown. I also want to point out that Dylan Sampson coming into the game had, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm going to pull this up for you guys real quick, 1,370 yards, 1,307 yards. I do believe now, with the numbers that he got in this game, on that final drive, I think he broke Travis Stevens' record for rushing yards in a single season. You can check me on that, but yes, he broke Travis Stevens' yard for a single season rushing record. He's at 1,485. Now, Dylan Sampson, now the all-time single-season leader for Tennessee in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and points. Major props to Dylan Sampson. Next on our list of torchbearers, Dante Thornton. Thornton got banged up, but he still played awesome. 3 catches for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, the touchdown at the beginning of the game, and then the 86-yard touchdown that was the big play of the game. And truth be told, he should have had another touchdown. As Thornton was wide open down the sideline on a play where Iamaleava just underthrew him. I mean, there's no way around it. Iamaleava underthrew him. So Thornton could have had 4 catches for 168 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, the guy played incredible in this game. He's been incredible all year, particularly given the injuries that faced Brew McCoy and how deep Tennessee had to go at receiver sometimes and the changing schemes to slow down Iamaleava and what they are able to do. But Thornton himself, again, played incredible. 3 catches for 118 yards. Heck, without the 86-yard gain, he still has 2 catches for 36 yards and a touchdown. 2 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown, and should have had 3 catches for over 50 yards and 3 touchdowns. And 2 touchdowns had it not been for that 86-yard touchdown. So overall, Dante Thornton, absolutely a torchbearer. And again, if I'm not mistaken, because of his play in this game, Thornton ends up finishing the season as the leader of Tennessee in receiving. And Yes, I believe he does. He will finish with 25 catches for 647 yards and 6 touchdowns in a rough, difficult year for Tennessee's passing attack that they wanted to be much more than it was. Major props to Dante Thornton. He gets a helmet sticker. He definitely earns a torchbearer. He took advantage of Vanderbilt's defensive schemes. They left a lot of things open over the middle. He opened those things up himself by being such a threat down the sideline. Without Dante Thornton, Tennessee doesn't have the complete offense that it typically does have. So Dante Thornton with an incredible game. And also Thornton himself, we've talked about Sampson with the career high, Nico tying his career high in touchdowns. Thornton also had a career high. This 118 yards is a career high, at least at Tennessee. Now, if you go back and look at his time at other schools, no, it's not. When he was at Oregon, he did have a game where he had 4 catches for 151 yards back in 2022. But at Tennessee, this is a high. So Dante Thornton is a torchbearer. 2 more torchbearers to go from Tennessee's 36-23 win over Vanderbilt. Nico Iamaleava is a torchbearer. Now, again, there was that massive underthrow down the sideline to Dante Thornton that should have been a touchdown. I'm looking at Nico Iamaleava's stat line. I just want to say up front, he should have thrown for over 300 yards and had 5 touchdowns with no interceptions. But because of that underthrow, he had 4 touchdowns and 1 interception. But Nico Iamaleava did finish the game 18 of 26 for 257 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And again, he averaged 9.9 yards per attempt. He also ran it 6 times for 42 yards. Nico Iamaleava was better protected in this game. He had a lot more help in a lot of ways than he's had all year. Part of that could be just Vanderbilt's inferior level of talent, but it's still an SEC school, and it's a much better Vanderbilt team than has been in years past. So taking all that into account, Iamaleava's play is definitely worthy of praise. Iamaleava, again, with 299 yards of total offense, 4 touchdowns. If he just doesn't make that underthrow, we're looking at a quarterback who's 19 of 26 for, I could do the math for you right now, guys, by the way. And I think many of you guys are right. I think he was trying to be so careful to avoid an underthrow that it cost him. But it was at the Tennessee 20. Okay, so if he makes the right throw there, Nico's 19 of 26 for 337 yards, 5 touchdowns, and no interceptions, and has 375 yards of total offense. He's got to be able to make those throws. He can't overthrow that or underthrow that, excuse me. But he still earns a helmet sticker. And the final torchbearer, and I think the player of the game, honestly. I started with the defensive player. I started with the defensive back specifically. I'm going to end with the defensive back, Jamal McCoy. Played lockdown defense all game. He shut down any chance Diego Pavia had of making a game out of this. That's why Pavia finished 8 of 17 for 104 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. And as I've talked about, that touchdown was a meaningless touchdown at the end of the game when Tennessee was leading 36-17. Vanderbilt didn't even get the ball back after that touchdown. McCoy had the best interception of the year, where he leaped up when he was outmatched size and strength-wise on what should have been a touchdown pass. He leaped up with one hand and tipped the ball to himself and had it land on him as he landed in the end zone. And with that interception, that really killed what could have been a Vanderbilt drive that could have put them up 3 scores because they had all the momentum at that point. So Jamal McCoy is the player of the game. He is our final torchbearer, and he gets a ton of credit. Now, before we get to our report card one more time, the last look is brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn.
To visit cctis.com. The information you need is easy to access, and setting an appointment is as simple as clicking the tab. Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, and Eye Care Optical at cctis.com. Simply the best.
All right, the report card for Tennessee's win over Vanderbilt, their 36-23 win over Vanderbilt. Here we go. Let's have a little fun. We're going to start with the offense. Tennessee's quarterback play gets an A-. If you take away that interception, Nico Iamaleava actually had a heck of a game. Again, he's that interception away from 19 of 26 for 337 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 6 carries for 42 yards. Iamaleava, that was an incredible game for him, arguably his best all year. Quarterback play gets an A-, and yes, that interception is where the minus comes in. Running back play gets an A-. Deshaun Bishop calls the false start at one point, and Dylan Sampson obviously had the very bad fumble at the beginning of the game to put Vanderbilt ahead 14-0. However, the running backs as a whole had 40 carries for 239 yards. Peyton Lewis had 2 carries, no yards, and then got hurt. But Dylan Sampson had 25 carries for 178 yards. Bishop had 13 carries for 61 yards. Sampson added another 2 catches for 6 yards. Now, again, they scored no touchdowns, but they were moving the ball. And then that drive at the end of the game is what pushed this into an A, guys. I mean, Tennessee got the ball with under 6 minutes to go, and it was a 36-23 game, and they didn't let Vanderbilt get the ball back because Dylan Sampson ran 4 times for 38 yards, 5 times for 51 yards to be exact. No, Dylan Sampson ran it 5 times for 51 yards, and then Bishop came in and ran it 3 times for 15 yards as Sampson got banged up right at the end of the game. Because of that, Dylan Sampson, Deshaun Bishop, this unit gets an A-. Wide receivers, A. Nico Iamaleava was dealing with an array of injuries in this game at wide receiver. Brew McCoy got hurt during pregame, which put a lot of pressure on Dante Thornton. How did he respond? 3 catches, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns. And if Nico Iamaleava doesn't make an overthrow, or an underthrow, that's an interception, it's 4 catches for 198 yards and 3 touchdowns. Chris Brazel II as the number 2 receiver, 5 catches, 54 yards. Perfect complimentary receiver, right? Dante Thornton gets banged up. Brew McCoy is banged up before the game. Mike Matthews comes in. 3 catches, 30 yards, a 14-yard touchdown grab. How about that? Chaz Nimrod comes in. 1 catch for 6 yards. Caleb Webb comes in. 1 catch for 4 yards. So Brazel, Thornton, Matthews, Nimrod, and Webb, 5 receivers all got in on the action. 1 clear-cut number 1, a clear-cut number 2, and a clear-cut number 3 who became a number 1 after the number 1 got hurt. The depth and the overall quality of play at receiver deserves a ton of credit. This unit was incredible at receiver as a whole. They also get an A. They don't even need an A-. They did not do anything wrong. Okay. Next, offensive line, A. If not, actually, no, A-. I'm going to go A-, and here's why. Iamaleava was not sacked at all. Played incredibly well. Pass protection deserves a lot of praise. There were a couple of penalties, though. Matter of fact, a few, which is why Tennessee finished the game with 13 penalties for 102 yards. You just can't have that. A lot of pre-snap penalties that were bad. And also, they got stopped on a 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 in the first half. And the interior blocking is not supposed to allow that to happen. So while they dominated on the ground still with 281 total yards of rushing, 538 yards overall, things like that push this offensive line grade to an A-. So I'm at an A-, an A-, an A, an A-, and then finally tight ends. And this unit gets an A. Because, again, pass pro was pretty much perfect. Can't see anything negative about the pass protection. That's a key part of the tight end play. And then in the passing game themselves, I mean, what else can you say? Miles Kitzelman had 2 catches for 33 yards and a touchdown. Ethan Davis had a 6-yard grab. I'm going to go A-, actually. I'm pushing that to A- too. So an A- across the board for the offense, except for receivers who got an A. And the reason I'm going to go A- is I just remember bringing up Ethan Davis. He did have a drop on a play. Now, I was a little bit behind him, but Nico Iamaleava was doing a rollout, had Ethan Davis right there, and threw it behind him. Davis has got to be able to make that catch. Davis drops it, and that results in Tennessee tight ends having to get an A-. It can't give him an A with something like that. So that is the offense. What about the defense? Well, defensive line gets a B. Y'all may think I should put it higher, and they did get good pressure, but they only sacked Vanderbilt 3 times and only had 4.5 tackles for a loss. They should have been more effective on that. I know the safety, but at the same time, they allowed Cedric Alexander to run 17 times for 60 yards, and they allowed Diego Pavia himself to run 11 times for 45 yards. Alexander had a touchdown run. I'm sorry, guys, but okay, I'll give him a B+. I'm hashing this out as I say it, but I don't think the defensive line was spectacular in this game. I think it didn't matter as much because Vandy had so many issues on offense. But I just think the defensive line they didn't blow me away. I thought they should have had more sacks than they did and played bigger. Omar Norman, Lott, Bryson Eason, and Joshua Josephs all assisted on a sack, so they all get a pass and they all get a shout out. But overall, and Jackson Moy had a sack, so I give Jackson Moy credit. But as a whole, I think they all could have done a little bit more, even with the Tyree West safety. Excuse me. I'm going to go linebackers. I'm going to go C. Now, Arian Carter played superb. 7 total tackles, 3 solo, assisted in a tackle for a loss, and a pass deflection. But when Vanderbilt was moving the ball early in the first quarter, we have to be honest here. They were. I mean, let's be fair to Vanderbilt here. Let's be fair for a minute to. Let's be fair to the fact that they came very close to making this a blowout early, and not just because of the mistakes up front. Okay, the mistakes up front with the kickoff return and the fumble by Sampson were issues, but the defense didn't have to let them score after that, and they did let them score after that. The defense didn't have to let them get a field goal drive on the next drive when Tennessee was finally cutting it close, and they did. So there were some major issues with Vanderbilt and the way they played, and honestly, I don't think there's any way around it. I think that Tennessee's defense, the linebackers and Jeremiah Thielander in particular, and those guys, they were out of position at a few times. And so I think when you think about that, I would say that, I got to give this unit a C. The linebackers have got to do better. Even though Arian Carter himself does get credit for the way he played specifically. I'm going to give Arian Carter credit, but I can't give the other guys credit. That's my one issue. And finally, though, most notably, the defensive backs. And the defensive backs get an A. Again, it would have been an A+, except for that final drive. I know they were just trying to work the clock, but you try to take pride in not giving up a touchdown, and they gave up a touchdown, which is why the score ended up being 36-23. The second most amount of points scored against Tennessee all year, the most being Georgia. But if you're Tennessee, you just can't. Again, you can't get an A+ when you allow that type of touchdown drive at the end. But they still held Diego Pavia to 8-17 for 104 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. And that Jamal McCoy interception warrants this defense an A. Going on to special teams, maybe I should separate this out. When I do place kicking, I factor in field goal kicking, kickoffs, and kickoff coverage. Well, kickoff coverage is enough. They gave up a touchdown run, a kickoff return for a touchdown on the first play of the game, and they almost gave up another one that was called back to a holding. But place kicking's an A+. And quite honestly, Max Gilbert hit a 50-yarder. So what outweighs what? Giving up the kickoff return outweighs the 50-yarder and everything else. So it's a C- for place kicking. I just can't go C. I can't go average. I can keep it at slightly average because of how this all worked out. All right, so what's next? We're going to go punting. A+. Yes, Jackson Ross had a 36-yard punt. It pinned Vanderbilt inside the 4-yard line. That was his only punt of the day. Perfect punt. Nothing wrong with punting. While the kick coverage team was awful, the punt coverage team was perfect, but that was more about Jackson Ross's punting than anything else. And finally, return game. It didn't really matter, but the unit gets a C because they didn't have any special returns. Peyton Lewis had 2 returns for 36 yards, averaging 18 yards a return. And then Dylan Sampson had 1 return for 4 yards. There was nothing significant about the returns. So the return game gets a C. That is my report card for Tennessee's win over Vanderbilt. Again, the Vols clinch a spot in the college football playoff. They can sit back over the next 2 weeks and just see where they're going to be going and get excited about that because they're in. They don't have to do any more work until December the 20th/21st. We're going to see how that goes. But I want to thank you guys all for tuning in to Off the Hook Sports. We are going to be back live on Monday to talk about this final weekend of college football and the crazy upset of Ohio State over Michigan. The college football playoff rankings are going to be super relevant Tuesday night. So we're going to talk about that with Caleb Calhoun. Again, the show is brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. This has been a presentation of the Off the Hook